They don't scream, they don't rage. Most of the time they smile, they compliment, they charm. That's why you never see it coming. Narcissists don't show up wearing warning signs. They slip into your life quietly through love, friendship, family, even leadership. At first, they make you feel special. Then slowly they make you feel small. You begin second-guessing yourself. You apologize for things that aren't your fault. You feel guilty for expressing needs, scared to say no, afraid to speak the truth. You call it a rough patch. You think maybe it's me, but it's not. You've been conditioned. Narcissists operate by distortion, distorting facts, emotions, boundaries, and your sense of reality. They twist your words, rewrite events, and weaponize your empathy. And by the time you realize you're being manipulated, it's often too late. You're emotionally drained, mentally scattered, and your sense of self is in pieces. Here's the most dangerous part. Narcissists often hide behind roles that make them untouchable. A parent, a partner, a boss, even a spiritual leader. And they feed off one thing: control. Control of how you think, how you feel, and how much of yourself you're willing to surrender to keep the peace. But there is one thing they cannot stand. One thing they cannot fake their way around. One question that strikes directly at the heart of their illusion and reveals exactly who they are. In this video, we're going to give you that question. One powerful sentence that exposes the truth without screaming, without fighting, without drama. And we'll show you how to use it with calm, clarity, and full Stoic control. Because this isn't about revenge. This is about taking back your mind. If you've ever felt trapped in a relationship where something felt wrong, but you couldn't name it, this is your moment of clarity. This is Victory Stoic. Subscribe now, like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and drop a comment. I will not be controlled. Let's expose the mask and take back your power. Part 1. Who is the narcissist? The psychology behind the mask. Number 1. A narcissist puts themselves above all else. They walk into the room like they own it. Not with violence or volume, but with an invisible hunger. Everything must orbit around them. Your attention, your time, your energy, your validation. They don't just want to be seen. They need it. It feeds them. A narcissist lacks true empathy. They may mimic concern, imitate care, even say the right things when convenient. But underneath, they don't feel what you feel. Your emotions are tools to be used, not respected. Your struggles? Inconvenient. Your boundaries? Threats to their control. They seek power in subtle ways. They dominate conversations, shift blame effortlessly, and frame themselves as the victim, especially when they're the one causing harm. They love to be praised, but can't tolerate being questioned. This isn't just arrogance, it's deeper. It's a psychological structure built around a fragile, hollow core. Their self-image is so inflated and so unstable that any challenge to their superiority feels like an attack. So they manipulate, gaslight, and charm their way into staying on top. To a narcissist, people are not individuals, they are mirrors. And if you stop reflecting the image they want to see, they break you or discard you. They don't want connection. They want control. This is the foundation of narcissism, and the reason why many don't see it until the damage is done. Because at first, narcissists don't seem dangerous, they seem magnetic. But behind the charisma is a mind that sees the world as a stage and you as a disposable character in their script. Understanding this is step 1. Because if you mistake manipulation for love, charm for character, or control for leadership, you're already in too deep. Stoicism teaches us to see things clearly, as they are, not as we wish they were. And what you're dealing with is not confidence, it's covert control. Number 2, psychology. Calls it narcissistic personality disorder, NPD. This isn't just arrogance, it's a distorted lens on life. When most people hear the word narcissist, they think of someone full of themselves, vain, loud, always taking selfies, bragging constantly. That image is easy to laugh at, easy to dismiss. But that surface-level understanding is a mistake, and a dangerous one. What psychology defines as narcissistic personality disorder, NPD, is far more complex, far more damaging, and far harder to detect. This isn't just about someone who thinks they're important. It's about someone who has a fundamentally distorted view of self, others, and reality itself. A person with NPD doesn't just want admiration, they're dependent on it. Their entire sense of identity is built around being seen as superior, special, or untouchable. But here's the contradiction. Under that superiority complex is a deep, often unconscious sense of inferiority. Their ego is inflated, but incredibly fragile. One challenge, one rejection, one moment where they're not in control, and the mask begins to crack. To maintain this false self-image, narcissists create a world around them that protects it. They surround themselves with people who reinforce their illusion. They twist facts. They deny reality. They rewrite stories in which they're always the hero or the victim, never the villain. And most dangerously, they manipulate those closest to them to believe the same distortions. This is where gaslighting begins. A narcissist will deny something they said, twist what you said, or question your memory, not to confuse you randomly, but to destabilize your trust in your own perception. Because the more confused you are, the easier you are to control. They don't need to be right. They need you to feel wrong. Unlike temporary narcissistic traits, which many people exhibit occasionally, NPD is a fixed pattern of thought and behavior, deeply rooted and extremely resistant to change. Most narcissists don't seek help because in their mind, they're never the problem. Everyone else is too emotional, too weak, too disloyal, too ungrateful. This distorted way of thinking affects every relationship in their lives. Partners feel drained, walking on eggshells. Children grow up doubting their worth. Employees or team members feel constantly manipulated or overlooked. And yet, outsiders may see the narcissist as successful, charismatic, even admirable. That's what makes NPD so insidious. It hides in plain sight. The narcissist doesn't just deceive others. They deceive themselves. They believe their own illusion, and they expect you to believe it too. If you don't, you're labeled the threat. Stoic philosophy teaches us to see things as they are, not as we wish them to be. Marcus Aurelius warned, "The nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength." But in the mind of someone with NPD, calm is impossible, because their entire identity depends on constant validation, constant superiority, constant control. So when you deal with someone like this, understand, you're not facing simple ego. You're facing a distorted psychological system built on illusion and fear. And until you see it for what it is, you'll keep playing their game by their rules. But once you recognize the truth, you take back your power. Not with anger, not with revenge, but with clarity. And clarity, for the Stoic, is everything. Number 3. Narcissists can be charming, successful, even kind. One of the biggest reasons people don't recognize narcissists is because they expect a monster. Someone loud, aggressive, toxic in obvious ways. But narcissists don't always show up with fangs. Sometimes they show up with a smile. They can be the most well-dressed person in the room, the one who holds the door for others, the one who donates to charity, says all the right things, makes you feel seen at first. Take Lisa's boss, for example. He was respected, articulate, generous with compliments. He remembered birthdays, praised employees in meetings, and always offered help. Lisa admired him until she started asserting herself. When she declined to work unpaid overtime, his tone shifted. Subtle at first, less praise, more pressure. Then came the guilt trips, the cold shoulders, the questions about her commitment. What changed? Lisa stopped playing her role in his script. She stopped feeding his ego. Narcissists don't always shout to control. They influence. They make you want to please them. And when you stop, that's when the mask slips. The warmth turns cold. The charm turns calculating. Stoicism teaches us not to judge people by appearance or momentary behavior, but by consistent patterns over time. A truly virtuous person doesn't punish you for having boundaries. A narcissist does, quietly, strategically, and with a smile. So beware, they're not always the loudest voice in the room. Sometimes they're the most polite one until you stop serving their need for control. Part 2. Who are the narcissists around you and how they impact your mental health? A narcissist can be anyone, your partner, boss, best friend, or even a parent. One of the most dangerous things about narcissists is that they rarely look like villains. They don't always scream or manipulate in ways you expect. Sometimes they smile, sometimes they help, sometimes they raise you. And that's exactly why they're hard to spot. They hide in the most trusted roles in your life. 1. The narcissistic romantic partner. At first, they seem perfect, attentive, intense. They say everything you want to hear. You feel chosen, like you finally found someone who gets you. Then, slowly, things change. They begin criticizing small things, your clothes, your tone of voice, your friends. They make jokes that cut a little too deep. They want to know where you are all the time. At first it feels like love. You call it clingy or passionate. But underneath, it's control. Let's say your partner surprises you with flowers, but only after an explosive argument where you threaten to leave. That's not affection. That's manipulation disguised as romance. Or maybe they shower you with gifts, then bring them up during fights. After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me? The message is clear. Your worth depends on your obedience. This pattern is known as love bombing, followed by devaluation, a classic narcissistic cycle. They idealize you, then slowly chip away at your confidence until you question everything about yourself. And by the time you're fully drained, they might discard you, or keep you around as long as you remain submissive. 2. The narcissistic boss or colleague. You finally land that job. Your boss seems driven, passionate, even charismatic. You're impressed. But as time goes on, something feels off. You bring up an idea in a meeting. No reaction. A week later, your boss pitches the exact same idea as their own and gets applauded. No credit to you. Or maybe they praise you in public but criticize you harshly in private. They constantly shift blame, never take responsibility, and surround themselves with yes men who feed their ego. They expect loyalty, but give none in return. Your wins are their wins. Your mistakes, all yours. And if you push back even slightly, you're suddenly difficult to work with, or not a team player. The result? You constantly feel on edge, undervalued, and emotionally exhausted. That's not leadership. That's narcissism in a power suit. 3. The narcissistic best friend. This one hits hardest because it sneaks up on you. A narcissistic friend doesn't always insult you. They just make everything about them. You're going through a breakup and they respond with, "That reminds me of when I went through mine. Let me tell you what happened." You get promoted at work and they say, "Oh, cool. I remember when I got mine was so unexpected." Over time, you notice a pattern. Your stories, your pain, your victories, they all become backdrops for their monologue. But the worst part? When you finally need them, emotionally, practically, or just to show up, they disappear. Narcissistic friends are present when it benefits them. They want an audience, not a connection. And when you stop clapping, they vanish or turn cold. You end up questioning whether you're asking for too much, being too sensitive, or just bad at friendships. You're not. You're being drained by someone who doesn't know how to care unless they're the center of it all. 4. The narcissistic parent. This one is the most deeply rooted and often the hardest to confront. A narcissistic parent doesn't raise a child, they raise an extension of themselves. From childhood, you may have been told, "Don't embarrass me in front of others. Why can't you be more like your sibling? After everything I've sacrificed for you, you owe me." It's not about teaching, nurturing, or loving. It's about control, image, and guilt. You may have grown up feeling that love had to be earned, that your value was based on performance, that expressing your needs was selfish, and if you challenged them, you were ungrateful, rebellious, or a disappointment. Even in adulthood, they may interfere with your choices, disrespect your boundaries, or guilt trip you into submission. So you're too busy to call your mother now? I guess I'm just not important anymore. This is emotional control through shame, and for many, it leaves deep scars that affect every future relationship. How it affects your mental health. When the narcissist is someone close to you, the psychological impact compounds over time. It's not just one argument or one betrayal, it's a long, subtle erosion of your confidence, clarity, and emotional stability. You begin to doubt your own memory. Did I really say that? Apologize for things that weren't your fault. Fear speaking up or setting boundaries. Feel guilt when doing things for yourself. Normalize being disrespected. You shrink yourself to keep the peace. And eventually you forget what peace even feels like. The Stoic response. Clarity without illusion. Stoicism teaches us to see people as they are, not as we wish they were. To separate our emotions from our judgment. To protect our inner freedom at all costs. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, yet reminded himself daily to stay calm in the face of flattery, lies, and manipulation. He understood, no title, no relationship, no bond justifies surrendering your soul. If someone, no matter how close, consistently manipulates, invalidates, or diminishes you, they are not a safe presence in your life. Recognize it, name it, and begin, even slowly, to reclaim your mind from their control, because once you see clearly, they lose their power. Part 3. The one question that exposes a narcissist. There's a reason most confrontations with narcissists go nowhere. You explain, you plead, you cry, but instead of understanding, they twist your words, flip the script, or walk away with a smirk. Because narcissists don't seek truth. They seek control. And control thrives in confusion. But what if you could shatter that control with a single question? Not a rant, not a fight, just a clear, direct question that flips the dynamic completely. Something like, can you explain why your needs always matter more than mine? Or how do you feel when you ignore my boundaries just to satisfy your own? These aren't just words. They're traps for illusion, because a narcissist can't answer them without revealing their hand. They live in a carefully crafted story where they are always the center, the victim, or the hero. These questions force them into a role they can't play, the accountable adult. Psychologically, narcissistic personalities, especially those with narcissistic personality disorder, are constructed on fragile ego scaffolding. Behind the grandiosity lies a desperate fear of inadequacy, masked by arrogance and manipulation. When asked a question that demands empathy and self-reflection, their internal defense system kicks in. Because to acknowledge your question honestly means admitting they are not the superior, not the victim, and not in control. That's why the moment you ask it, you'll see something shift. Maybe it's a flash of rage. Maybe it's a scoff or complete shutdown. But what they will never do is calmly answer with honesty. Take Clara, for example. She had spent 5 years in a relationship with Daniel, a man who always had to be right, always needed her to bend her schedule, suppress her feelings, and praise him constantly. One day, exhausted, she looked him in the eye and asked, "Can you explain why your needs always override mine?" He stared at her, stunned. Then he laughed and said, "You're being dramatic again." When she repeated the question, he stormed out. No answer, no conversation, just retreat. In that moment, Clara realized he never loved her as a person, only as a function. Or take David, who worked under a narcissistic boss named Carol. Carol loved praise and demanded loyalty, but rarely gave recognition. When David finally said, "How do you feel when you disregard my boundaries just to push your deadlines?" she went silent. The next day, she cut him out of a major project. Why? Because the question wasn't just inconvenient. It was destabilizing. It put her in a position where she either had to admit wrongdoing or expose her disregard for others. She chose the latter. Or Maya, whose mother had emotionally manipulated her since childhood with guilt and obligation. Every time Maya stood up for herself, her mother would cry, guilt trip, or threaten to cut her off. When Maya calmly asked, "Can you explain why your happiness depends on me doing things your way?" her mother exploded. "You're ungrateful. After all I've done for you." This wasn't an answer. It was a defense mechanism. Because narcissists don't reflect, they deflect. Stoic wisdom cuts through this fog with a blade of clarity. As Epictetus said, not the often quoted lines, but a deeper one rarely shared. It is not events themselves that disturb us, but the story we tell ourselves about them. Narcissists live in a story where they are always entitled, always right, and always owed. Your question threatens that narrative, and that's why it works. It doesn't attack, it confronts. It doesn't blame, it inquires. But it corners them into a place they cannot mentally survive: emotional equality. In terms of control dynamics, this kind of question shifts power instantly. Until now, they've been the one framing reality, setting the rules, defining truth. But when you calmly ask why your needs are constantly dismissed or why your boundaries mean nothing, you take the pen from their hand and start writing your own version of the story. And make no mistake, they feel it. Even if they don't say it, they sense the shift. Suddenly, they're not the authority. You are. That's why they'll either lash out, shut down, or retreat. It's not about you winning a debate. It's about revealing the imbalance, the manipulation, the raw asymmetry that was always there but buried under charm, guilt, and confusion. Psychology shows that narcissists lack emotional empathy but have strong cognitive empathy. They understand how emotions work but don't genuinely feel them. This means they know exactly what your question implies. They know what they're doing. They just don't care. Until they're exposed. And that exposure doesn't have to be dramatic. It can be one moment, one sentence, one shift in tone, where you're no longer playing their game. That's what this question offers. A mirror. Not for them, but for you. To see clearly what kind of relationship you're really in. To wake up from the illusion that maybe they'll change, maybe they don't mean it, maybe it's your fault. It's not. They've trained you to silence yourself. This question is the first time you speak with clarity. And they hate clarity. If you're still emotionally entangled, still unsure whether you're overreacting, remember this. Healthy people don't panic when asked to explain their behavior. They don't deflect. They don't punish. They reflect. And if someone can't even sit with a respectful, honest question about how they treat you, they've already given you the only answer you need. Stoicism doesn't teach you to argue, it teaches you to perceive. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Don't waste time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." And part of being one is no longer tolerating the games of those who only seek to dominate. You don't need to fight a narcissist, you just need to see them. And once you do, you'll never unsee it again. Part 4. What to do if you can't leave a narcissist yet. Not everyone can walk away from a narcissist overnight. Sometimes it's your spouse, your parent, your boss. Sometimes you're sharing a mortgage, raising kids, or depending on their income. Stoicism doesn't ignore these realities. It teaches you how to survive them with clarity, strength, and dignity until you're truly free. Step 1. Rebuild your personal boundaries and never negotiate them again. Narcissists don't destroy you in one blow. They wear you down slowly, testing what you'll tolerate. You say nothing the first time they insult you in public, so they push further. You let the guilt-tripping slide, and suddenly that becomes the price of peace, until you draw a line. Take Jessica, a graphic designer in Austin, Texas, married for 8 years to Brian, a man who turned every disagreement into an attack on her sanity. He would humiliate her in front of friends, then call her too sensitive when she got upset. One night at dinner, when Brian made yet another sarcastic comment about her weight, Jessica didn't argue. She put her fork down and said, calmly but firmly, "You will not talk to me like that again." Then she stood up and left the table. Not because she expected him to agree, but because she finally stopped asking for permission to be respected. That's what a Stoic boundary looks like. Next, stop trying to change them. Change how you respond. Stoicism teaches you that control begins within. Narcissists bait you into emotional reactions because your reaction is their proof of dominance. The less control they have over your emotions, the less power they hold. Think of Corey, a 29-year-old barista in Chicago dealing with a narcissistic roommate, Nate. Nate constantly criticized Corey's schedule, his friends, even the way he cooked. For months, Corey tried to explain, reason, and defend himself, only to be met with mockery. Then he switched tactics. The next time Nate tried to provoke him, Corey just said, "You're allowed to think that," and went back to reading. No fight. No energy wasted. Over time, Nate stopped picking fights, not because he changed, but because there was no longer a fire to fuel. Third, focus on what you can control. Your thoughts, your choices, your routines. Narcissists want your identity to revolve around their moods. Your mission is to reclaim that center. As Epictetus said, you may not control all events, but you can control whether they reduce you. That's what helped Amanda, a stay-at-home mom in Denver, who was stuck in a marriage with a partner that constantly invalidated her emotions. Her husband, Michael, called her lazy, made every parenting decision unilaterally, and dismissed any opinion that wasn't his. Amanda didn't have the resources to leave yet, but she started waking up early. She journaled, she exercised. She reminded herself daily, my reality is valid, even if he refuses to see it. And slowly her energy returned, not because he changed, but because she stopped living in his emotional shadow. Fourth, build a support system outside of them. Narcissists isolate by design. The more alone you feel, the more dependent you become. Break the illusion. Reconnect with old friends. Tell someone the truth. Seek therapy. Join a support group. When Ryan, a 41-year-old sales manager in Los Angeles, realized his boss was stealing credit for his work and gaslighting him in meetings, he didn't confront her immediately. He started documenting everything. Quietly, he reached out to a former colleague who had left the company for similar reasons. Through that connection, he was introduced to a recruiter, rebuilt his resume, and found a better job within 3 months. He didn't scream. He didn't beg. He leveled up. That's the power of perspective from outside the narcissist's reach. And fifth, perhaps most important, build your strategic exit. Even if it takes a year, even if it takes 5. This isn't weakness. This is Stoic intelligence in action. You don't have to leave recklessly, but you do have to start moving. Open a private bank account. Save what you can. Acquire skills. Study legal options quietly, especially if there are custody or property issues. Remember Rebecca, a high school teacher from Ohio, who spent 15 years married to a covert narcissist. She wasn't beaten, but she was slowly erased. Her husband, Paul, controlled every financial decision, mocked her ideas, and treated her like a burden. She stayed because of their 3 kids and lack of support. But she started tutoring online at night, saving every dollar, researching divorce law. She even met with a financial advisor in secret. 4 years later, when she left, it wasn't emotional. It was surgical. She walked out with her dignity, her plan, and her freedom. Throughout it all, she clung to one quote by Marcus Aurelius: "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Stoicism doesn't demand that you explode. It demands that you wake up. You don't need to expose them to the world. You need to see them for what they are and stop handing them the script. Narcissists don't fear confrontation. They fear your clarity. They fear your independence. They fear the moment you stop needing their validation. When that day comes, and it will, they'll feel it. Not because you shouted louder, but because you stopped playing the role they wrote for you. That's when you win. Quietly, powerfully, permanently. Stoic. Conclusion: expose the mask, reclaim your life. A narcissist only has power when you keep handing it to them. Not through weakness, but through confusion, fear, guilt, or the false hope that they'll one day become the person you believed they were. But they won't. Because they don't want change, they want control. The moment you see that clearly, without emotion, without excuses, something inside you shifts. Not rage, not revenge, awakening. You don't need to fight, you don't need to explain. You only need one question, one sharp moment of clarity to tear down the illusion. And from that point forward, you're no longer reacting, you're choosing. That is Stoicism in action. This philosophy doesn't exist to make you numb or passive. It exists to make you clear, unshakable, and sovereign. You weren't born to be manipulated. You weren't born to walk on eggshells. You were born with the right to live by reason, not emotion, by truth, not fear. You don't owe your life to people who drain you. You owe it to the strongest version of yourself. And that version is still there, under the doubt, under the silence, under the years of gaslighting. It's waiting for you to come back. So now it's your move. You've seen the signs, you've heard the truth, you have the tools. What you do next determines everything. If this message hit where it needed to, if you're done being controlled, then take the first step, out loud. Comment below, "I reclaim my mind." That's the declaration. That's the break. Subscribe to Victory Stoic for more content that doesn't sugarcoat, doesn't flatter, but gets to the root of what it means to be free, focused, and fully in control. Like the video. Share it with someone who's still in the fog. They might not see it yet, but your clarity might become their mirror. Thank you for watching. Stay sharp, stay sovereign, and never forget, the moment you stop being their pawn, you start becoming your own master.